Good morning, everyone. Today we are going to see about osteology of mandible. Osteology roughly means the study of structure of bone. In this slide share, we are going to see about the introduction of mandible, ossification and osteology of mandible, parts and anatomy, attachments and relations, blood supply, lymphatics, and nerve supply of mandible, structures related to mandible, applied anatomy, age changes of mandible, physiologic variants, and references. Introduction. Mandibular jawbone is the largest and the strongest bone of the face. In Greek, mandare means to masticate or chew, whereas in Latin, the word mandibula means the jawbone. It develops from the first pharyngeal arch. It forms the lower facial skeleton and it is the only movable bone of the skull. It has a horseshoe-shaped body, ramus, angle, condylar process, and a coronoid process. The rami provide attachment to the muscles of mastication. Coming to osteology, mandible is the second bone after clavicle to ossify in the body. Secondary type of cartilaginous joint is formed at temporomandibular joint. Parts that ossify in the cartilage includes incisive part below the teeth and coronoid and condylar process. The upper half of ramus ossifies above the level of mandibular foramen. Meckel's cartilage has a close relationship to the mandibular nerve. Meckel's cartilage is the cartilage of the first brachial arch. It extends as an unbroken rod of cartilage and its proximal ends are connected with the ear capsules. The distal extremities are joined to one another at the symphysis by mesodermal tissues. A single ossification center for each half of mandible arises in the 6th week of intrauterine life, in the region of bifurcation of inferior alveolar nerve into the mental and incisive branches. Here, this is the inferior alveolar nerve, this is the mental nerve, this is the incisive nerve. Here is the region of bifurcation. As the ossification continues, the Meckel's cartilage becomes surrounded by the bone. This is the Meckel's cartilage and this is the primitive mandible. Ossification stops at future lingula. The ossification spreads as follows in the body, medially above the incisive nerve, ventrally around the mental nerve to form the mental foramen, upwards between the nerve and the Meckel's cartilage. The incisive nerve is contained in a groove, a bone formed by the lateral and medial plates which are united beneath the nerve. Forwards towards the midline, where it comes into close relationship with the similar bone of opposite side, but from which it is separated by connective tissue. Backwards produces at first a trough of bone in which lies the inferior dental nerve, and much later the mandibular canal is formed. This is the center of ossification, region of bifurcation of inferior alveolar nerve into mental nerve and incisive nerve. This is the Meckel's cartilage. Ossification stops at the site that will later become the mandibular lingula, from where the Meckel's cartilage continues into the middle air and develops into auditory ossicles, that is malleus and incus. The rami. The ramus of mandible develops by a rapid spread of ossification backwards into the mesenchyme of the first brachial arch, diverging away from the Meckel's cartilage. This point of divergence is marked by mandibular foramen. The condylar cartilage. It is a carrot-shaped cartilage which appears at the 14th week of intrauterine life in the region of condyle and occupies most of the developing ramus. It is rapidly converted to bone by endochondral ossification. It acts as an active center of growth till the age of 20 years. It gives rise to condyle head and neck of mandible, posterior half of ramus to the level of inferior dental foramen. Carrot-shaped cartilage. The coronoid cartilage. It is relatively transient growth cartilage center from 4 to 6 months of intrauterine life. It gives rise to coronoid process and anterior half of ramus to the level of inferior dental foramen. The alveolar process. It starts when the deciduous tooth germ reaches the early Bell stage. The bone of mandible begins to grow on each side of tooth germ. By this growth, the tooth germs come to be in body trunk, which also includes the alveolar nerves and vessels. Later on, Septa of bone between the adjacent tooth jump develop, keeping each tooth separate in its bony crest. The mandibular canal is separated from bony crypts by a horizontal plate of bone. The alveolar process grows rapidly during the period of tooth eruption. Coming to the parts of mandible, mandible is roughly divided into two parts, that is body and ramus. This is the body in red color and the ramus. Body. Each half of body has outer and inner surfaces and upper and lower borders. The body ends and the rami begin on either side at the angle of mandible, also known as the gonial angle. This is the gonial angle. Outer surface features. Symphysis menti. It is a line at which right and left half of bone meet. It is marked by a faint ridge. This is symphysis menti. Mental protuberance. Median triangular projecting area in the lower part of midline. The inferolateral angles of the protuberances form the mental tubercles. This is mental protuberance and mental tubercles. The mental foramen lies below the interval between the premolar teeth. This is mental foramen. The oblique line, continuation of the sharp anterior border of ramus of mandible. It runs downwards and forwards towards the mental tubercles. This is oblique line of mandible. Incisive fossa, depression that lies below the incisor teeth. These are the incisor teeth and this is the depression below the incisor teeth. Incisive fossa. Inner surface features. The mylohyoid line. It is a prominent ridge that runs obliquely downwards and forwards from below the third molar tooth to the median area below the gingival tubercles. This is mylohyoid line. Submandibular fossa. It lodges the submandibular gland, which is present below mylohyoid line, as a hollowed out surface. This is submandibular fossa. The mylohyoid lines divides the medial surface of mandible into two parts. This is submandibular fossa and sublingual fossa. The sublingual fossa is present above the mylohyoid line and lodges sublingual gland. Here. The posterior surface of symphysis menti is marked by four small elevations called the superior and inferior genital tubercles. Here are small elevations which are superior and inferior genital tubercles. The upper or alveolar border bears socket for the teeth. The lower border of mandible is also called the base, and near the midline, the base shows an oval depression called the digastric fossa. Here, the digastric fossa is present. Coming to ramus of mandible, it is quadrilateral in shape and it has two surfaces, four borders, and two processes. This is ramus of mandible. Lateral surface, it is flat and it bears the oblique ridge. Medial surface, the mandibular foramen lies a little above the center of ramus at the level of occlusal surfaces of the teeth. It leads into the mandibular canal, which descends into the body of mandible and opens at the mental foramen. This is mandibular foramen. The anterior margin of the mandibular foramen is marked by sharp tongue-shaped projection called the lingula. This is lingula tongue-shaped projection. It is directed towards the condyloid process of the mandible. The mylohyoid groove begins just below the mandibular foramen and runs downwards and forwards to be gradually lost over the submandibular fossa. This is mylohyoid groove. The upper border of the ramus is thin and is curved downwards, forming the mandibular notch. This is the upper border. The lower border is the backward continuation of the base of the mandible. This is lower border. Posteriorly, it ends by becoming continuous with the posterior border at the angle of the mandible. This is lower border and angle of mandible. The anterior border is thin. This is the anterior border, while the posterior border is thick. The coronoid process. It is a flattened triangular upward projection from the anterior superior part of the ramus. This is the coronoid process. Its anterior border is continuous with the anterior border of ramus and the posterior border bounds to the mandibular notch. The condyloid process. It is a strong upward projection from the posterior superior part of the ramus. These are condyloid processes. Its upper end is expanded from side to side to form the head. The head is covered with fibrocartilage and articulates with the temporal bone to form the temporomandibular joint. The constriction below the head is the neck, and its anterior surface presents with a depression called a pterygoid fovea. This is the neck of condyloid process, and this is the depression, pterygoid fovea. Now coming to the muscles of mastication and other important muscles that are attached to the mandible. The muscles of mastication are a group of muscles associated with the movements of the jaw. Embryologically, the muscles of mastication develop from the first pharyngeal arch. Consequently, they are innervated by a branch of trigeminal nerve, that is mandibular nerve. These are masseter, lateral and medial pterygoid, and temporalis. Masseter. Its origin is in the anterior two-thirds of lower border of zygomatic arch and the zygomatic process of maxilla. Its insertion is in the ramus and coronoid process of mandible. This is the masseter muscle. Action: elevates mandible to loose mouth and superficial fibers protract the mouth. Temporalis. Its origin is in the temporal fossa. Insertion: coronoid process of anterior border of ramus. This is the coronoid process. This is the temporalis muscle. Actions: it elevates the mandible, also does the side-to-side grinding movement. Posterior fibers retract the protracted mandible. Coming to lateral pterygoid, the origin is of the lateral pterygoid's upper head is from the crest of greater wing of sphenoid and the lower head from the lateral surface of lateral pterygoid plate. Its insertion is in the pterygoid fovea on anterior surface of neck of mandible and the anterior margin of articular disc and capsule of TMG. This is pterygoid fovea here. This is lateral pterygoid plate. This is the upper head of lateral pterygoid and this is the lower head of lateral pterygoid. Its actions are: it depresses the mandible to open mouth, it protracts the mandible and help in grinding movement. Medial pterygoid. Origin for the superficial head is from the tuberosity of maxilla. For deep head, it is medial surface of lateral pterygoid plate. Insertion: posterior inferiorly to the medial surface of ramus. This is the deep head of medial pterygoid. This is the superficial head of medial pterygoid. This is the ramus of mandible. Its actions are: elevates mandible, protracts mandible, and side-to-side movement. Buccinator. Its origin is from the alveolar process of maxilla and mandible, TMJ. Insertion. The fibers of buccinator are inserted into fibers of orbicularis oris. This is buccinator. Actions: it prevents accumulation of food in the vestibule. It aids in whistling and smiling. And in neonates, it helps in suckling. Now coming to platysma. Its origin is from the subcutaneous tissue of infraclavicular and supraclavicular. Insertion is the base of mandible, skin of cheek and lower lip, and angle of mouth. Here is the platysma muscle where insertion is in the lower lip, skin of chin, base of mandible here, and angle of mouth. Its actions: it depresses the mandible, it pulls the angle of mouth downwards. Mentalis. Its origin is the incisive fossa of mandible. This incisive fossa of mandible. Insertion is in the skin of chin. Actions: elevates and wrinkles of chin, protrude lower lip. Mylohyoid muscle. Origin is in the mylohyoid line of mandible. Insertion: posterior fibers in the hyoid bone, middle and anterior fibers in the median raphe between mandible and hyoid bone. Actions: it elevates floor of mouth at first stage of deglutition. It depresses depression of mandible and elevation of hyoid bone. Coming to attachments on mandible. The oblique line on the lateral side of body gives origin to the buccinator as far towards as the anterior border of the first molar tooth. In the front of this origin, the depressor levi inferioris and the depressor anguli oris arise from the oblique line below the mental foramen. Here is the buccinator, depressor levi inferioris and depressor anguli oris. The incisive fossa gives origin to the mentalis. This is the mentalis muscle. The parts of both the inner and outer surfaces are just below the alveolar margin and covered by the mucous membrane of mouth. Mylohyoid line gives origin to mylohyoid muscle. This is the mylohyoid muscle. Superior constrictor muscle of the pharynx arises from an area above the posterior end of the mylohyoid line. The posterior end of mylohyoid line, here there is superior constrictor muscle. Pterygomandibular raphe is attached immediately behind the third molar tooth in the continuation with the origin of superior constrictor. Here is the pterygomandibular raphe attached. Upper genial tubercle gives origin to genioglossus and the lower tubercle to the geniohyoid. This is the upper genial tubercle which gives origin to the genioglossus and lower one gives to geniohyoid muscle. Anterior belly of digastric muscle arises from the digastric fossa. Here is the digastric fossa and this gives rise to digastric muscle. Deep cervical fascia is attached to the whole length of the lower border. Whole length of the lower border, there is deep cervical fascia attached and the platysma is inserted into the lower border. The lateral pterygoid muscle is inserted into the pterygoid fovea on the anterior aspect of the neck. This is the anterior aspect of the neck, pterygoid fovea. Lateral pterygoid is attached here. The medial pterygoid muscle is inserted on the medial surface of ramus. This is the medial surface, roughened area behind the mylohyoid groove. The temporalis is inserted into the apex of the medial surface of coronoid process. Here the temporalis is attached. The whole of the lateral surface of ramus, except the posterior superior part, provides insertion to the masseter muscle. Here, whole ramus, except for the posterior superior part, masseter muscle is attached here. The lateral surface of neck provides attachment to the lateral ligament of TMJ. This is the lateral ligament of TMJ. Posterior superior part of the lateral surface is covered by parotid gland. The sphenomandibular ligament is attached to the lingula. Here the sphenomandibular ligament is attached. Blood supply of mandible. Blood supply to the mandible is via small periosteal and endosteal vessels. The periosteal vessels arise mainly from the inferior alveolar artery and they supply the ramus of the mandible. The endosteal vessels arise from the perimandibular branches of maxillary artery, facial artery, external carotid artery, and the superficial temporal artery. These supply the body of mandible. The mandibular teeth are supplied by dental branches from the inferior alveolar artery. Lymphatics. The lymphatic drainage of the mandible and mandibular teeth are primarily via the submandibular lymph nodes. However, the mandibular symphysis region drains into the submandibular lymph node, which subsequently drains into the submandibular nodes. Nerves. The main nerve associated is the inferior alveolar nerve, which is a branch of mandibular division of trigeminal nerve. The inferior alveolar nerve enters mandibular foramen, courses anteriorly in the mandibular canal, sends branches to the lower teeth and provides sensation. This is an inferior alveolar nerve. Comes after the mental foramen as the mental nerve and incisive branches. Incisive branches go and supply the incisor teeth. At the mental foramen, the inferior alveolar nerve branches into the incisive and mental nerve. The mental nerve exits the mental foramen and courses superiorly to provide sensation to the lower lip. The incisive nerve runs in the incisive canal, provides innervation to the mandibular, premolar, canine, and lateral and central incisors. Structures that are related to mandible: salivary glands, parotid, submandibular, sublingual gland. Parotid, submandibular, and submental lymph nodes are also related to mandible. Arteries which are related are maxillary, superficial temporal, masseteric, inferior alveolar, mylohyoid, mental, and facial. Nerves: lingual, auriculotemporal, masseteric, inferior alveolar, mylohyoid, and mental. Then muscles of mastication: medial and lateral pterygoid, masseter, and temporalis. Ligaments: lateral ligament of temporomandibular joint, stylomandibular ligament, spinomandibular ligament, and pterygomandibular raphe. Coming to the applied or clinical consultations part, surgical trauma to the mental nerve can produce paresthesia of the lip, which recovers slowly. Familiarity with the location and appearance of the mental nerve reduces the likelihood of injury. Partial or permanent cutting of mental nerve results in permanent paresthesia or diasthesia. Diasthesia is an abnormal, unpleasant sensation felt when touched, caused by damage to the peripheral nerves. In partially or totally edentulous jaws, the disappearance of the alveolar portion of mandible brings the mandibular canal closer to the superior border and mental foramen. When these patients are evaluated for implant placement, the distance between canal and superior surface of bone, as well as the location of mental foramen, must be carefully determined to avoid surgical injury to the nerve. The lingual nerve lies close to the surface of oral mucosa in the third molar region and goes deeper as it travels forward. It can be damaged during anesthetic injections and oral surgical procedures, for example, third molar extractions. Lingual nerve can be injured when a periodontal partial thickness flap is raised in the third molar region or when releasing incisions are made in that region. Resective osseous surgery in posterior region is impossible or difficult due to the amount of bone that must be removed distally towards the ramus to achieve resection of periodontal osseous defect on the distal aspect of mandibular second or third molar. Distal to the third molar, the external oblique ridge circumscribes the retromolar triangle. This region is occupied by glandular and adipose tissue covered by unattached, non-keratinized mucosa. If sufficient space exists, distal to the last molar, a band of attached gingiva may be present. Only in such a case can a distal wedge procedure be performed. Anatomic structures pertinent to the treatment planning of the implant patient in mandible. Mandibular canal. Second, anterior loop of mandibular canal. Third, anterior extension of mandibular canal. Mental foramen. Submandibular fossa. Retromolar canal. And lingual inclination of the alveolar ridge. Coming to transmandibular implants, it was developed to retain dentures in lower jaw. It is used in extremely resorbed ridges with minimal height less than 10 centimeters. It requires submandibular skin incisions and administration of general anesthesia. There are high incidences of complications. It is rarely used today and it is of two types, Moll and Bosker. These posts pass through jawbone. Metal plate is placed in order to join these posts, and gum tissue covers the post. Small type of transmandibular implant. It was a staple bone implant. It splints adapted to the lower border of mandible, to which it is fixed by stabilizing pins. The two transmandibular screws were driven transgingivally into the mouth, and survival rate was 93% after 5 years and 90% after 15 years. In Bosker type of implant, two metal splints, one below lower border and two second intraorally, to connect four posts piercing through soft tissues. It was less reliable and survival rate was 70% after 5 years. Subperiosteal implants. These were used in treatment of atrophic mandibles. Custom implant is designed from plaster model obtained from impression. The implant was designed with several posts, typically 4 or more for an edentulous jaw, which passed through the gingival tissue. Subperiosteal were kept on the bone and were placed underneath the gums, but above the jawbone. These posts, these remain above the gum tissue as anchors for the replacement of teeth. The gum tissue covers the implant framework. It consisted of a cast metal framework with a subperiosteal component in contact with the bone and a transgingival component, which were used to retain the dental processes. The number of transgingival posts on the implants depend on the number of missing teeth, averaging 4 to 6 for totally edentulous jaw. Poor survival rates of less than 50% for 5 to 10 years, with frequent complications of gingival inflammation involving tissue reaction around the post, caused by the lack of soft tissue attachment to the metal post. These complications led to the development of sinus tract, resorption of the cortical bone, and exposure of the framework. Therefore, Subperiosteal implants are rarely used today. The most common implant design being used today is the screw-shaped or threaded cylindrical implant. A threaded implant design is preferred because it engages the bone well and is able to achieve good primary stabilization. Autogenous bone grafts. Bone from intraoral sites. In 1923, Higidius attempted to use bone grafts for the reconstruction of bone defects produced by periodontal disease. The method was revived by Neighbors and O'Leary in 1965, and numerous efforts have been made since that time to refine its indications and technique. Sources of bone include bone from healing extraction wounds, bone from edentulous ridges, bone refined from within the jaw without damaging the roots, newly found bone in wounds especially created for the purpose, bone removed from tuberosity or ramus, bone removed during the osteoplasty and osteotomy, the lingual surface of the mandibular maxilla at least 5 mm away from the roots. Coming to age changes in the mandible, in infants and in children, the two halves of mandible fuse during the first year of life. At birth, the mental foramen opens below the sockets for the two deciduous molar teeth near the lower border. This is so because the bone is made only of the alveolar part with teeth sockets. The mandibular canal runs near the lower border. The foramen canal gradually shift upwards. Angle is obtuse. It is 140 degrees or more because the head is in line with the body. The coronoid process is large and projects upwards above the level of condyle. This is 140-degree angle of mandible. The mandibular canal is near the lower border of mandible. In adults, the mental foramen opens midway between the upper and lower border because the alveolar and subalveolar parts of the bone are equally developed. The mandibular canal runs parallel with the mylohyoid line. The angle reduces to about 110 or 120 degrees because the ramus becomes almost vertical. This is the mandibular canal. This is 110 degrees angulation. In old age, teeth fall out and the alveolar process is absorbed so that the height of the body is markedly reduced. The mental foramen and the mandibular canal are close to the alveolar border. The angle again becomes obtuse about 140 degrees because the ramus is oblique. This 140-degree angulation, and this is the mental foramen which has come close to the alveolar border. Coming to physiologic variants, males generally have squarer, more prominent mandibles than females due to the larger size of the mental protuberance in males and the decreased gonial angle. The gonial angle is 90 degrees in males and 110 in females. In rare instances, a bifid or trifid inferior alveolar canal may be present. This can be detected on X-ray as a second or third mandibular canal. Branches of the inferior alveolar nerve commonly run through these extra foramina and confer a risk for inadequate anesthesia during the surgical procedures involving the mandible. A cleft chin can result from inadequate or absent fusion of mandibular symphysis during the embryonic development. This often results in a depression of the overlying soft tissue at the midline of the mandible. This is a genetic condition that is inherited in an autosomal dominant fashion and found more frequently in the male population. These are my references. Thank you.